Hi everybody, and welcome back to Room 9, our region's largest classroom. My name is Miss St. Louis, and I'm a teacher at Rogers Elementary School in the Mehlville School District, and we are located in South St. Louis County. Today, I'm here to teach a reading lesson that's geared towards students who are in the 3rd grade, but all learners are more than welcome to join and explore with us. So let's get started. I thought today we might begin with a few moments of mindfulness. It's Thursday, we've had a long week. I know that we're getting tired and we're really excited because tomorrow's Friday. And then that means it's almost time for the weekend. So our bodies are a little bit tired right now. So mindfulness is a really great way to just kind of reset our thoughts, calm our bodies down, and get them ready for some of the new knowledge they're going to absorb today. So you can either sit calmly, you can close your eyes, just take some deep breaths in and out, in and out. Just think about all the positive things that have happened to you this week. Is there anything that you're really proud of that you did? Maybe you made a new friend this week. Maybe you did really good on a spelling test or a math test. Maybe you worked really hard on your reading this week, or you learned some new sight words. It might be big, it might be small, but take a moment to feel really proud of yourself. You're accomplishing a goal and doing great things, and that's something to always be proud of. Deep breath in and out, in and out. And whenever you're ready, you can quietly open your eyes. Mindfulness is such a great way just to take even a moment to ourselves, just to recenter. And even if we're not thinking anything, even if we're just focusing on deep breaths in and out, it really helps to just get rid of all those negative thoughts, right? Push any thoughts out of our head and just really center our minds. And when we're done, then we're ready to take on our new adventures. Are you ready to take on today's new adventure? I think so. Today is our last day together this week, so we're going to hit our last figurative language topic. This week for warm-up, we've been talking about all different types of figurative language. Remember, figurative language is using words or phrases to mean something other than their literal meaning. So far this week, we've talked about similes and metaphors, both of which are ways to compare things, right? Similes are when we make a comparison of two things using the words like or as. For example, the girls were like 2 peas in a pod. Metaphors are comparisons of two things when we say that one is the other. For example, he is a shining star. Now, yesterday we introduced a new one, the hyperbole. And that's an exaggeration that emphasizes something. For example, my mom's to-do list is a mile long. Now, we know that your mom's to-do list probably really isn't a mile long. We're exaggerating the length of it, right? Really showing how long it is through that exaggeration. Today, we're going to talk about a brand new form of figurative language, and that is personification. Personification is when we give human qualities to non-human things, inanimate objects like tables and chairs. So an example of that would be that slice of pie is calling my name. Well, pie really can't call your name, right? It's an object. But what we mean is that that piece of pie, you want that piece of pie, right? Maybe it smells really good or looks really good. It's enticing you to want to eat it. So we've given something like pie that's a non-human thing and given it a human-like quality such as talking. So I want to share with you some different forms of personification today. So here's my first one. My alarm clock screamed at me to wake up. What do you think here? What's the personification, right? Let's talk about this. What's the non-human object? Good, the alarm clock, right? And what is it doing, right? What's that human quality we've given it? Good, screaming. We know that alarm clocks don't actually scream at us, but when we say that our alarm clock's screaming, right, we mean that it's so loud, right? It's just yelling at us to wake up in the morning, even though we might want to hit the snooze button a few times. Here's the next one. My marker danced across the page. What is the inanimate object, the non-human thing? Very good, the marker. And what is it doing? Right, what's that human quality? Good, dancing. Markers don't really dance, right? We're not in Beauty and the Beast. But by saying it's dancing across the page, we mean that it's moving across the page, right? As maybe we're drawing a really cool picture or doing something in art class. So it's a way to show movement. Let's do another one. The wind danced from tree to tree. So what is the object we're talking about here? Very good, we're talking about wind, and what is it doing? Good, dancing. But is it really dancing? No, again, we're showing that movement, right? How it's flowing. So it might be flowing gracefully and swooping, right? We're trying to show some movement here, really add to the feeling, right? We could have just said the wind blew, but now we're adding in some different language, right? Spicing up our writing a little bit. Another one. The paper was begging to be drawn on. What's happening here? Right, we're talking about the paper and how it's talking, right? Begging, right? Paper can't beg. Now, my dog can beg, but paper can't, right? So we're kind of showing how this blank piece of paper is something we really want to draw on. It's not something that's actually happening, but we're showing some exaggeration here. All right, another one. The wind was whispering. Well, you just heard my dog whisper, but the wind was whispering. Yeah, wind doesn't whisper, but we're showing here the noise that that wind is making, right? We might be able to hear it in the background, right? Sometimes we can hear it whistling through trees. Very good. The teardrops kissed my cheeks. What do you think about that one? Yeah, do teardrops really kiss your cheeks? No. So we're talking about teardrops and how they do something that humans do, right? They kiss, but really we just mean that they touch your cheeks, right? They're touching your cheeks. Maybe you're outside in a rainstorm, right? So they're just kissing your cheeks. We might say that snowflakes kissed your cheeks if it's snowing outside. Very good. The flowers danced in the wind. What are we talking about here? Okay, we're talking about flowers, yes. Yeah, and about how they're dancing, right? So again, we're showing that movement. The flowers really aren't dancing, but probably something like wind, right, is making them move. And they might have this flowing motion that maybe kind of looks a little bit like dancing. Very good. All right, let's try another one. Ooh, the chocolate cake is tempting me. Good, we're talking about chocolate cake, yep. Yeah, we're talking about how it's tempting us. It's really not, right? But again, we're talking maybe about how it smells or how it looks, how we feel about it, right? personification is a great way to kind of show some feeling about things as well, right? And how we feel about some of these objects. Great job. Let's do one more. The sky roared. Good, we're talking about the sky. Good, and yeah, we know it really didn't roar. What do you think it probably did? Yeah, we're probably talking about a storm, right? Roaring, probably some thunder. Very good. So personification is this great way to kind of talk about inanimate objects in a different light, right? I love seeing personification in poetry because oftentimes in poetry, when we write about inanimate objects, right, these, things like tables and chairs, right, we want to add these special qualities to them to make them a little bit more special. And personification is a really great way to do that. So as you're reading some poetry, I suggest you try and look to see if there's any personification that's in there. Something really cool that authors add. But are you ready to get into today's poetry lesson? Because it's about one of my favorite topics. Let's start. All right, so let's get ready to start today's poetry lesson. All week long, we've been talking about sound devices that are used in poetry. Those words that create sound and enhance rhythm. Let's review what we talked about this week. We have talked about repetition, which is repeating the same word, line, or stanza. For example, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. So that's that repetition, right? We're repeating a line. We've also talked about alliteration, and that's when you repeat the same consonant sounds. For example, Samson the studious snake slid down the snow-covered slope. Or one we might all know is Sally sells seashells by the seashore, right? It's kind of that tongue twister that we're getting. Another one that we've talked about is rhyming, right? Words that have the same ending sound. And we saw those a lot when we talked about patterns that we see in poems. For example, Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear, Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair. So we see that AA. So we talked about AB patterns. We talked about ABAC. We talked about AABB. So lots of different patterns are out there that we see with rhyming. Today, we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite sound devices, and that is onomatopoeia. Now, not only is that word fun to say, but onomatopoeia words are fun to say too. Onomatopoeia are words that imitate sounds. A lot of the time we see these words when we read books like comic books, right? Superhero books, and we see words like pow, bang, zoom, right? There are these sound effect words that we see. So they add a lot of fun to books. So today we're going to read some poems and we're going to look to see how they use onomatopoeia as part of the poetry. Are you ready? Let's dive in. The first poem book that we're going to look at is Amphibian Acrobats. So all of the poems in this book have to do with amphibians. Let's find our first poem. The Flag Waver. Frog went a-courtin' in Mountain Creek. Chirp. Frog went a-courtin' in Mountain Creek. He called, "Frog gals, I'm the mate you seek." Chirp. He perched on a rock and sang his tune. Chirp. He perched on a rock and sang his tune. His vocal cell puffed like a white balloon. Chirp. Next frog kicked his flag foot high. Boing. Next frog kicked his flag foot high. A dance move meant for his lady's eye. Boing. A rival hopped up next to him. Boing. A rival hopped up next to him. Frog's foot shot up. Flag! Take a swim! Boing. What did you think about the use of onomatopoeia in this story? Yeah, it kind of emphasized, right, what was going on. When we read a poem, there's not always pictures to go along with the poems. So we're kind of getting some action in here when we see these words, right? I can imagine this frog making those noises. I can imagine this frog making those jumps, right? It adds a little something extra to it, a little fancy detail. Now, onomatopoeia wasn't the only thing this story had going on. What else did you see in this poem? Yeah, there was rhyming words in this poem, right? We have creek and seek, tune, balloon, high and I. So there's some rhyming. I think there was one more thing though. Yeah, we saw some repetition in here too, right? Frog went a-courting in Mountain Creek. Frog went a-courting in Mountain Creek. He perched on a rock and sang his tune. He perched on a rock and sang his tune. Next frog kicked his flag foot high. Next frog kicked his flag foot high. A rival hopped up next to him. A rival hopped up next to him. So that repetition was in there. So this author of this poem used a lot of different sound devices in one poem to really add to that rhythm of the poem. Pretty cool, huh? How you can use all of these in one single poem. All right, let's read our little science fact here about the Waianae dancing frog. Like most males, the Waianae dancing frog calls by filling his vocal sac with air. So we see that vocal sac right there. The vocal sac balloons bright white to increase his chances of being noticed by a female. This daytime fancy dancer from the Western Ghats Mountains in India whips one hind leg up sideways, then behind, splaying his toes in an impressive foot flag. Other species of Indian dancing frogs and several other frog species that mate in noisy rushing water habitats also signal with their feet. An interested female frog might not hear a single male's call, but when she sees the Waianae dancing frog's ballooning white throat and webbed foot wave, she knows he's looking for a mate. His calls, throat balloon, and foot flag are also a signal, a warning to, let's start that one over. His calls, throat balloon, and a foot flag also signal a warning to other nearby males. Stay away. If a rival male crowds the defender's rocky midstream perch, whap. All right, let's look at our next one. Oh, another frog. The frog swallower. This small, warty father, nose pointed and slender, takes tadpole care further than any frog other. With no help from mother, he guards eggs on litter until larvae quiver through jelly-clear covers. Then trusty dad gathers his egg sons and daughters and gulp provides shelter. Where eggs hatch and prosper, his vocal sac stretching. Then dad nurtures a giver till tadpoles turn froglets. Then brrr, dad delivers. So not as much onomatopoeia on this one, but there was some. Added a little something, right? We could have just said he ate it. Could have just said he spit it back up. But instead, we use these onomatopoeia words to really show some action, right? Helps to really create this picture in your mind, right? He didn't just spit it out, he burped it up, right? He gulped it down. Adding those sound words kind of helps you create this little image in your head. Let's learn a little about this Darwin's frog to see why this poem was written. Frogs make their distinctive chirrups and ribbits by pushing air over their vocal cords. Most frog singers are males, advertising to females or claiming a territory. The air in their balloon-like vocal sacs make their calls much louder. The male Darwin's frog calls with a quiet pip, 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 pip because he uses his large vocal sac for a different task. Most male frogs don't care for young, but a female Darwin's frog lays her eggs and hops away, leaving the dad to stand guard in the daytime forest floors of Chile and Argentina. When tiny developing tadpoles move inside their clear eggs, dad swallows them into his large vocal sac. What? The protected eggs hatch in about 3 days. At first, the tadpole's skin absorbs the frothy, nutritious liquid dad makes for them in his vocal sac. Later, the tadpoles can swallow it. In 7 to 10 weeks, when the tadpoles metamorphose, dad opens his mouth and out hob froglets. So here we see, right, that the author really wanted to showcase how this life cycle of these frogs is different than other frogs because gulp, that dad is gulping them down, providing that shelter, and then when they turn into those froglets, burp, he burps them back up. So by using that onomatopoeia, he's really emphasizing those 2 points that are really important in this frog's life cycle. It's a really cool way to use onomatopoeia in a poem. I liked it. All right, I got another book for you with some onomatopoeia. And this one has a lot. So we are back in our Superlative Birds book. And today we're going to read a poem called Calling Contest. If you visit the rainforest in Central America and you are very lucky, you might be near enough to hear bonk, bonk, squeak, the waggling ping of the 3-wattled bellbird. Here I am, I make the biggest sound of all. But if you are too close, this jackhammer call pounds in your eardrums. If you visit the islands of Ceram in Indonesia, and you are very, very lucky, you might be near enough to hear the salmon-crested cockatoo's jungle shout-out. Here I am, I make the biggest sound of all. But if you are too close, this chainsaw call rattles your eardrums. If you visit a night forest in New Zealand, and you are very, very, very lucky, you might hear boom, 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 the deep rumble rising from an earthbound bowl, kicked smooth by the cockapoo. Here I am, I make the biggest sound of all. This foghorn calls thrums your eardrums, even if you are very, very, very far away. Oh, lots of onomatopoeia here, right? We see words like bonk, squee, boom, so many onomatopoeia words. Now, why do you think the author chose to use these onomatopoeia words? Yeah, right? He's trying to emphasize the sounds that these birds make. So he could have just said, well, the bird makes its call. But he wants to show us. He wants us to really think about and even try and make those sounds of the birds, right? So try and make some with me. Can you make a good bonk? Bonk, bonk. What about a squee? Squee. All right, here's the next one. Can you make that one? What about a good rock? Good. Oh, what about a caw? What about the big boom, boom? Yeah, so he's really trying to get us to think about those sounds that these birds are making and try and make them ourselves. It's a really cool way to add onomatopoeia and get the reader involved in the process. So, is that all we heard in this book? In this poem? No, there was some repetition, right? We saw, right, that if you are lucky enough, if you are very lucky, you might be near enough, right? And the repetition of the here I am, I make the biggest sound of all, right? So we're talking here about 3 different birds in 3 different areas that all have this very distinct sound. Let's read our science note to learn a little bit more about these birds. Birds call to send out alerts and to communicate with their flocks or chicks. Birds sing to defend territories, attract males, and sometimes to bond with mates in singing duets. Their songs and calls are produced with a two-sided voice organ called the syrinx. The most spectacular bird sounds are nearly always made by male birds. Ornithologists, we learned that word this week. What is an ornithologist again? That's right, it's a person who studies birds. Ornithologists think a male 3-wattled bellbird singing his heart out in a South American rainforest may be signaling to females that he's strong enough to defend the best territory. The salmon-crested cockatoo from Indonesia may use his high-pitched squawks to convince cockatoo hens he's healthy and fit. New Zealand's cockapoo inflates its throat to belch deep, bone-rattling advertisements that travel for miles through the forest understory. To compare sound levels that are measured in decibels, these noisemakers would have to be the same distance from their recording device. So it's very difficult to say for certain which of these birds is the biggest loud mouth. So they don't know for sure who's the loudest, but we know that they're pretty loud. So, pretty cool. All right, so today we talked about onomatopoeia, using words that imitate sound. And we saw some really cool ways today how authors used onomatopoeia in their poems. So I would challenge you that as you're writing stories or poetry, right, try to use some onomatopoeia, right? A really great way to start is to use it in speech bubbles and add it into your pictures. And then you can start to add it into your writing. Onomatopoeia just adds that extra little flair to your writing, right? Adds those extra cool sight words. They're super fun. And as you're reading books, look to see if the author has any onomatopoeia that they're using. Maybe in pictures, right? Maybe they're using it in the text, but it's always fun to see. And it's always kind of fun to make those noises. It's one of my favorite things to do when I do a read aloud. I want to thank you guys for joining us this week and exploring these different sound devices in poetry as we read, and the figurative language that we talked about in our warm-ups. You guys did an excellent job exploring brand new topics and really expanding your minds. I'm really excited that we got to talk about all this, and now you're exposed to it and you can start to see it in the books all around you. Thank you for your time and spending some time with us. We really hope that we'll see you again next time. But until then, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again next time here in room 9. Bye, everybody.
Teaching in Room 9 is made possible with support of Bank of America, Dana Brown Charitable Trust, Emerson, and viewers like you.